They burned my firewood. 8 full cords of seasoned oak, stacked, dried, cut by hand over 2 years, and about 600 pounds of smoked venison I was counting on to get me through winter. So yeah, I drained their $1 million lake in 72 hours. Now, before you jump to conclusions and think this is some crazy revenge story, let me tell you something. I didn't break a single law, not one. My name's Daniel Crow. I'm 53, retired from the U.S. Forest Service, spent most of my life reading land like other people read newspapers, soil, water, timber, boundaries. All of it tells a story if you know how to listen. And for the last 15 years, I've been living on 40 acres just outside of Ridge Hollow, Colorado. Nothing fancy, off-grid, mostly split wood, gravity-fed water. An old propane generator that coughs to life every morning like it's got an attitude. And about 200 yards downhill from my place, that's where the problem started. 12 luxury homes, all glass, steel, and ego, wrapped around a man-made lake that looks real pretty in drone shots. Infinity edges, dock lights, paddleboards nobody uses, the kind of place where every driveway has at least one electric SUV and nobody knows how to change their own oil. They call it Silver Ridge Estates. Sounds peaceful, right? Yeah. Well, they needed my water to stay peaceful. See, that lake, it's not natural. It's fed by a creek that runs through my land, controlled by an old stone dam my grandfather built back in 1949, hand-laid rock, iron wool gate. Still works like a charm if you treat it right. For decades, water spilled naturally down into what eventually became their lake. No contracts, no paperwork, just what folks used to call a good neighbor understanding. But here's the thing about people who build luxury communities: they don't understand understandings, they understand control. And they had an HOA. Now, I'm not part of their HOA. Never was. My land predates that subdivision by over half a century. I'm not on their map unless they zoom way out. But that didn't stop them. First, it was little things, notices stuck on my fence. Vegetation compliance. Visual nuisance. One time they even complained about the smell of diesel from my generator. Like, yeah, sorry, my life isn't scented like eucalyptus and money. I ignored all of it, because legally it meant nothing. Until one morning, I walked out to my woodshed, and everything was gone. Not missing, not stolen quietly. No, it was worse than that. Ashes, blackened ground, warped nails, the frame still smoking like it had something left to say. My racks, empty, chains cut clean, padlock snapped, and zip-tied to what was left of the fence, a laminated notice. Fire hazard violation. HOA Code 12.9b. Combustible materials removed for community safety. Signed, Caroline Voss, HOA President, former corporate attorney. I remember just standing there for a minute, not yelling, not panicking, just letting it sink in. Because this wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. They didn't just take my wood, they burned it, my winter heat, my food supply, gone in one afternoon because someone with a clipboard decided they had authority they never actually had. And that's the moment everything changed. Now here's the part most people don't get. I didn't react right away. I didn't storm down there or start yelling at gates. I went inside, made coffee, sat down with a stack of old documents I hadn't looked at in years. County records, land surveys, water rights filings. Because if there's one thing I learned working federal land, it's that the truth is always written down somewhere. You just gotta be patient enough to find it. And oh, I found it. Buried in a 1949 filing under my grandfather's name, Senior Water Rights. Clear as day. Meaning legally, that water belonged to this land first. Meaning that lake down there only existed because water flowed past my dam. Meaning they weren't entitled to a single drop. And here's where it gets interesting. That good neighbor understanding, the one that had been in place for decades, it expired 6 months before they burned my wood. No renewal, no contract, no updated agreement. Just assumption. They assumed the water would always be there, just like they assumed they could walk onto my land and enforce their rules. That's when I realized something. They didn't see me as a neighbor. They saw me as background. Something old, quiet, irrelevant. The kind of thing you only notice when it stops working. So I decided to show them exactly how much it mattered. That afternoon, I walked down to the dam. It hadn't changed much, moss on the stones, metal will rusted just enough to complain when you touched it, but solid, dependable. I took photos, documented everything. then filed a maintenance notice with the state water board. 72 hours. Totally legal, totally documented. And then, I waited. Because sometimes the most powerful move isn't loud. It's patient. All right, let me pause the story right here for a second, because this is the part most people either misunderstand or completely miss. From a legal perspective, what Caroline and that HOA did, that wasn't just overstepping, that was trespassing, destruction of private property, and potentially conversion, which is a fancy way of saying they interfered with someone else's belongings like they owned them. They didn't, not even close. According to standard procedure, an HOA only has authority over properties that are legally bound to it, meaning you signed into it, or your deed includes it. If your land sits outside that jurisdiction, their rules are basically just strongly worded suggestions, and walking onto someone's land to enforce those rules. That's where things get real expensive, real fast. Now flip it around. What I was about to do, shutting off water flow, sounds aggressive, right? But here's the difference. I own the water rights, senior rights, which in the Western U.S. is everything. Older rights come first, period. No HOA, no developer, no fancy legal team overrides that unless there's a contract in place. And in this case, there wasn't. And this is where it gets interesting psychologically. This is a psychological trap. People in controlled environments like HOAs get used to authority always working in their favor, rules always being enforceable, consequences always landing on someone else. So they stop questioning whether they actually have power, they just assume it. Until one day, they run into someone who operates outside that system. And suddenly, all that confidence turns into panic. Because control only feels real until it isn't. So, 72 hours, that's all the notice required. And I gave it, properly filed, time-stamped, no shortcuts. Because if you're going to make a move like this, you don't leave cracks for someone else to slip through later. Day 1, late afternoon. I walked back down to the dam. Same boots, same slow pace, like I'd done 100 times before. Except this time, I wasn't checking flow. I was changing it. That old iron wheel hadn't been fully turned in years. You could feel it the moment I put both hands on it, stiff, resistant, like it knew what was coming. I leaned in, started cranking. Metal screamed, not a little squeak either. I'm talking full-on, echo through the trees kind of sound, the kind that makes birds take off all at once. And then it moved. Slow at first, then steady. Water that had been feeding their lake for decades shifted, redirected back into the original creek bed that ran off to the east, the way it used to before anyone decided to build luxury homes around something they didn't own. I stood there for a minute, just watching it. No drama, no speech, just water, doing what water does when you stop telling it where to go. By that evening, nothing looked different down there. Not yet. Lakes don't drain like bathtubs. They resist. They pretend everything's fine. Day 2, that's when it started showing. About 18 inches down. Doesn't sound like much until you see it. Docks sitting crooked, ladders hanging too high. The little fountains they installed for aesthetics, sputtering like they were choking on their own reflection. I took a walk down the ridge, kept my distance, didn't need to get close. You could already see it in their body language. Confusion first, then concern. A couple of them standing near the shoreline, hands on hips, staring out like maybe the water would apologize and come back. It didn't. By afternoon, the color started changing. Clear blue turned into that murky green-brown, the kind that smells before you even get close. Algae waking up, heat settle. In oxygen dropping. Fish started floating. Now here's the thing about places like that. Everything looks perfect when systems are working, filtration, circulation, chemical balance. It's all hidden. But the moment one piece fails, everything shows. Day 3. That's when the illusion broke completely. 4 feet down, mud flats stretching out where water used to sit. Thick, cracked, uneven, like the bottom of something that wasn't meant to be seen. Mosquitoes everywhere. Clouds of them. Because stagnant edges are basically an invitation. Their filtration systems? Running dry, grinding noise echoing off empty intake lines. Pumps pulling air instead of water. That's not just cosmetic damage. That's expensive, like 5-figure per house kind of expensive. And that's when she showed up. Caroline Voss. Black SUV, probably worth more than my entire cabin. Pulled up fast, tires crunching harder than necessary. like the gravel personally offended her. She stepped out. Heels. Yeah, heels on a dirt and rock driveway. Sank about half an inch with every step, but she kept walking anyway like gravity was negotiable. Didn't knock. Just opened the gate and came straight up to my door. You need to turn that water back on immediately. No hello, no question, just command. I opened the door, leaned against the frame, let her talk. You're causing environmental damage. You're violating community stability agreements, and I will have legal action filed by the end of the day if this isn't corrected. I remember almost smiling at that, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. I stepped inside, grabbed a folder, came back out, handed it to her. She looked at it like it might bite, then flipped it open. Itemized invoice. $48,600. Replacement value for timber, food stores, structure, labor not included. Below that, 30 years of unpaid water usage, calculated modestly, didn't even push it. And then, the new terms. Annual access agreement, $4,000 a year, 25-year term, first 5 years prepaid. Plus conditions. Any construction within 500 feet of my boundary required written approval. No access trails across my land without permission. And most importantly, my right to shut off the spillway with 72 hours notice, anytime, for any reason tied to trespass or violation. She read it, once, twice. Then she laughed. Not amused, not friendly. That sharp kind of laugh people use when they think they still have control. This isn't how this works. I shrugged. It is now. She closed the folder, handed it back like it was beneath her. You'll be hearing from our attorneys. And just like that, she turned, walked back to that SUV, got in, and left. No deal. No agreement. Just confidence. Day 5. That's when things got ugly. Not dramatic ugly, real ugly. The lake was barely recognizable. What used to be water was now a wide, uneven basin of cracked mud, deep lines running through it like something had split open. Sections of exposed rebar sticking out near the artificial edges, construction skeleton showing through the illusion. That's something developers don't advertise, what things look like underneath. Property values? You could practically hear them dropping. Neighbors weren't walking calmly anymore. They were pacing, phones out, calls being made, voices raised. Because now it wasn't just about inconvenience. It was about loss. Financial, environmental, reputational. And fear, because none of them controlled the situation. Day 6, quiet. That kind of quiet where people are waiting, hoping someone else fixes it. No one did. Day 7. She came back. Same SUV, slower this time. No heels. Different energy. She walked up, stopped a few feet from the door, didn't open the gate, just stood there. I stepped out, didn't say anything. She held up a checkbook. Let's resolve this. No threats, no speeches, just that. I let the silence sit for a second, then nodded toward the table outside. We went through it line by line. No arguing this time. No laughing. Just signatures. 48,600, paid up front. 20,000 prepaid toward the contract. Full agreement signed, notarized, copies made. And just like that, everything changed. The next morning, I walked back down to the dam. Same will, same sound. Only this time, I turned it the other way. Water started flowing back, steady, controlled, filling that basin they'd built their lives around. Within days, the lake started to look like itself again. Clearer, calmer, like nothing had happened. But that wasn't true, because now, they knew. That lake wasn't theirs. It never was. And every drop sitting in it was there, because I allowed it. So yeah, that's how it ended. Or at least, that's how the situation got resolved on paper. But here's the thing. Stories like this don't really end when the contract gets signed. They just shift. Because what changed wasn't just a water agreement. It was the balance of power. And that's the part people don't talk about enough. The lesson here is control is often an illusion, especially in places where rules are everywhere. HOAs, gated communities, structured neighborhoods. They create this environment where everything feels managed, predictable, enforceable, like there's always someone in charge who can fix things or punish someone else when something goes wrong. But that only works inside the system. Step 1 inch outside of it, and suddenly, all that authority starts looking a lot thinner than people expected. And here's where it gets real. Because what Caroline and her HOA did, it wasn't just about rules, it was about assumption. They assumed that because they had authority over their community, they had authority over everything around it. They assumed that because something had always worked a certain way, it would keep working that way forever. And most importantly, they assumed that the person on the other side wouldn't push back. That's the dangerous part. Because when people get used to not being challenged, they stop checking whether they're actually right. They just act. And sometimes that works. Until it doesn't. Now let me be clear about something. This isn't a revenge is good story. Because if I wanted revenge, I could have dragged this through court, made it uglier, longer, more expensive for everyone involved. But that's not what this was. This was correction, a reset, a reminder that actions have consequences, even when you're used to being the one who enforces them. And yeah, I'll admit, there's a certain satisfaction in watching people realize they don't have as much control as they thought. But it's not about winning. It's about boundaries. From a psychological standpoint, what happened here is something you see all the time, just on a bigger scale. People operate inside systems long enough, they start confusing permission with ownership. They forget where the lines actually are. And when those lines get enforced, it feels like an attack, even when it's just reality showing up uninvited. That's why Caroline's tone changed. Day 3, she was threatening lawyers. Day 7, she was asking to resolve things. Nothing about the law changed in those 4 days. Only her understanding of it did. And that right there is the shift. Because once someone realizes they're not in control, they stop escalating and start negotiating. Now here's another layer most people miss. Responsibility. It's easy to blame the HOA. And yeah, they earned it. No question. But systems like that don't exist in a vacuum. They're built by people, maintained by people, and supported by people who either question them or don't. Every homeowner down there, they benefited from that lake every day, but I guarantee you, not one of them ever asked, where does the water actually come from? Because it was easier not to, and that's human nature. We don't question convenience. We just trust it until it disappears. So if there's anything worth taking away from this, it's this. The lesson here is, know what you depend on, and know who controls it. Because whether it's water, electricity, land access, or even just agreements between neighbors, if it matters to your life, you should probably understand it better than it's always been there. And if you're on the other side of that equation, if you're the one holding the resource, the leverage, the control, then use it responsibly. Because just because you can flip the switch, TCH, doesn't always mean you should. In my case, I did, but only after someone else crossed a line first. And even then, I gave notice, followed procedure, kept it legal. Because once you step outside that, you're not correcting a problem anymore. You're just creating a new one. Now I'm curious, what would you have done if someone walked onto your land, destroyed something you spent years building, and told you it was for community standards? Would you have taken them to court? Would you have let it go? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Shift the balance and let reality do the talking. Drop your thoughts below. I read more of those comments than you'd probably expect. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, or a situation where someone thought they had authority they didn't actually have, I want to hear that too. Because trust me, stories like this, they're a lot more common than people think.